I would like to just turn the time over and introduce our next speaker, which is Dr. Wayne Pickstone. Dr. Pickstone is a doctor of Chinese medicine. He's a naturopath, a neurologist, a nutritionist. He's a mindset coach. He's been a wealth coach and also a business coach to some very successful people as well as athletes. Dr. Pickstone has done over 30 years. He's been over 30 years in the wellness industry. He's had over 100,000 consultations, and I would say Wayne's the guy that people often go to when they haven't been able to find answers anywhere else. So with that said, Wayne, know that you've been a mentor to the wellness industry. You've been a keynote speaker at some very large events and as well. So highly respected. So Wayne, what I'd like to do now is I'll go ahead and stop my screen share and give you the ability to share your screen, and I'll let you take it over from there.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so everyone should see the screen now. Okay, thank you, Bart. Thank you very much. And where we're going to start with is probably because of what's happening around the world today. What I'm about to say is something that basically started around about 10 to 15 years ago. And these are some of the things that I used to talk about back then, whether it be on a stage with 1,000 people or 500 people, or just one-on-one in terms of within the clinic. So we are in a crisis, and we can actually feel it now a little bit more than maybe what I'm about to say. But yeah, the Western world is in a crisis. And this particular quote, I think, really rings true now. Health in the near future will be more sought after than money, gold, real estate, or any kind of material wealth. The governments of the Western world do not know where they are going to put their Alzheimer's and chronic disease patients of the future. And at present, we're actually seeing that, like when I said this 10 to 15 years ago, it wasn't as relevant or wasn't as easily seen, I suppose is the best way of saying it. But today we're seeing it all the time with regards to new dementia blocks being put beside nursing homes. They're popping up everywhere. And this was 10 years ago. The governments of the Western world, they actually knew that they didn't know where they were going to put their Alzheimer's chronic disease patients of the future. So we need solutions fast. And this is a webinar that a seminar I went to before Christmas. And these were some of the statistics if we're just looking at Australia. Now I know we've got people from all around the world, but think of these statistics are basically the same no matter where we live. So 50% of Australians now suffer from a chronic disease. 20% of the population of all ages have chronic pain. 13% suffer from arthritis. All chronic conditions are on the rise, like cardiovascular disease, diabetes, cancer, dementia. And it's interesting, unfortunately, depression is the #1 disease of the Western world, the #1 disease. 63% of Australians over 18 years are now overweight or unfortunately obese. And this is not just an aging issue, it affects all of us, unfortunately. And if they say if nothing changes, the statistics that's happening now, if nothing changes by the year 2060, 1 out of 3 children will be diagnosed with the ASD, ADD on the spectrum disorder, unfortunately, if nothing changes. So what I'm going to go through now with regards to the next part of the Zoom presentation tonight, this is thousands and thousands of research hours and seminars, genetic research and PubMed research that I went through to put this together. And what I really mean by that as well is that I was a huge skeptic about what I'm about to talk about. I actually went down a huge rabbit hole of research, and that's what this is representing, what you see in front of you now. A huge rabbit hole, and I nearly didn't come out. The research, once I started looking at the research, it just became overwhelming that if this did what it would do in clinic, it would revolutionize everything that I've ever seen with regards to the wellness industry. And it certainly did live up to exactly what I skeptically was thinking at the time, because I was a huge skeptic about the product, about the about being able to put this stuff into a bottle. So I'm sure there may be even people who are skeptical even now listening to this. And I don't mind skepticism. Skepticism, I think, is important. Being open-minded with your skepticism is really, I think, important. And cynicism doesn't get us anywhere. So healthy skepticism, I think, is really important. It's going to allow us to move forward. Do your research, but please don't do as much as what I did. And the interesting thing about our genetics is that our genes are acquiring trillions of new mutations every day. Now, that's not hundreds, that's not dozens, that's trillions of new mutations every single day. So we're going to go through 5 important aspects of today's Zoom meeting. We're going to go through what are RSMs, where are they made, how do they decline, why haven't I heard of them, and we'll go through some science as well. So, of course, they are called redox signaling molecules. Now, some really important concepts to grasp initially. Redox signaling molecules are native to the body, and that's really important to understand. Native means that we make these things internally within us. For example, there's another word that we all know, which would be natural. Natural means that we need to eat, or we have these things presented to us by even vitamins or natural supplements and herbs, the foods, the proteins, the water we drink. But natural also means we can be allergic to it. I've got people, for example, who are allergic to the sun. I've got people who are allergic to water. They have to drink it through a straw. I've also got, and you've probably heard of people allergic to gluten, and people allergic to peanuts and bee stings and all these different things, or bees. All these different things we can be allergic to. And the interesting thing with native, when we, knowing that we make this internally, it means also that there is no toxicity at all. So they are bioactive, which means they are used in trillions of seconds or very quickly within our body and have no toxicity, which is really important. That was one of the most important things for me to understand about this, about redox signaling molecules as well. But the big theme here is native. Like, we can't grow an apple in our body. We can't grow peanuts in our body, but our body can make redox signaling molecules. And therefore, because they are native and have no toxicity, they can be used with any other product, nutrient, anything that that man or woman has made, we can take it as well. Now, really important to understand that redox signaling molecules, what are they not? They are not vitamins like A, B, C, D, E. They are not alkaline water. They are not minerals. They are not antioxidants, green juices, collagen. So think of anything else that we may take into our body is basically a building block. Now, building blocks are really important. We need building blocks to allow our body or our cells to heal. And I'll go through this a little bit shortly. But really important to understand building blocks are important. They are necessary. The right ones will even help the redox signaling molecules to actually work better. So therefore, why is it important to know the difference between redox signaling molecules and building blocks? So I'll do an analogy here to help us to understand this at a deeper level. So everything I'm about to say happens in trillions of seconds. So you're listening to me right now, and it's happening in trillions of seconds. The same way, and we'll just go back in terms of, we're going to now be the best light bulb builders in the world. So we're going to build light bulbs. So what do we need? We basically need building blocks: glass, alloys, metal, gases, filaments, whatever we need. We've got to build this light bulb. But the light bulb is totally useless without electricity. And that electricity could be 10,000 kilometers away or 10,000 miles away. As soon as you hit the switch, basically the light turns on. But once again, the light bulb is useless without the light switch being turned on or without the electricity. So let's bring this now home in terms of what this looked like in terms of a cell. So think of, once again, this happens in trillions of seconds. If I asked you to think of your big toe right now, that happened in trillions of seconds, all modulated by redox signaling molecules. So think of a cell. What do we need? We talked about this before. We need building blocks like vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, proteins, alkaline water, all different things to build this cell. But the cell, once again, is useless without some sort of communication or some sort of what I'm going to describe as electricity. And then within this electrical circuitry within the human body, known as redox signaling molecules, we then have genetic switches. So some genetic switches we want turned on, others we want turned off. For example, we want anti-inflammatory genetic switches turned on, and we want inflammatory switches turned off. But in some people, it's the reverse. Some people, unfortunately, have their anti-inflammatory switches turned off, and their inflammatory switches turned on, which we do not want. So really important to understand that building blocks are important, but the redox signaling molecules allows the building blocks to actually work at a whole another level. Also important to understand that redox signaling molecules have modulating or adaptogenic characteristics. So what they'll do is they'll adapt and create homeostasis in the body wherever they are needed. So for example, and this happens everywhere, I'm just going to use one example here to bring this home for you. And I'll talk about the immune system. And there are many different types of immune system cells in the body. So think of one particular immune system may be elevated or high, and the other part of the immune system may be deficient. Now, when we have adequate redox signaling molecules, it won't allow it to stay like this. For example, one high, one low. What it'll do is modulate that and bring it back to balance. But when we haven't got enough redox signaling molecules to actually stay like this and actually create all different types of health challenges. So when we have enough redox signaling molecules, as mentioned, it'll bring the high one down and the low one up. And it does that all through the body, which is really important to understand that it's got modulating or adaptogenic characteristics. And they say there's about 300 billion cells that actually die to be reborn every day, all modulated by redox signaling molecules. And our DNA changes shape 3 million times per second, all modulated by redox signaling molecules. And they also say that the amount of cells in our brain and the amount of neurons, etc., in the brain, when you look at the amount of that, of how many are there, would equate to more than the Milky Way, more than the stars in the galaxy. So we're an incredible being with incredible ways of healing. Without redox signaling molecules at the cellular skin level, what happens is everything starts to break down. What should normally happen is healthy young cells should be around the 28 days. And when we get to about 50, it's about 90 days. Where I am now, it might be 120, 150 days. But the main theme I would like to get across here, that as we age, our redox signaling molecules also affect the way we look, because we actually end up with less and less of them. So that's around about a 200% decline, unfortunately. And without redox signaling molecules, you literally start to see the visible effects of aging. So we've gone through what are these intriguing molecules. They are native to the body. Think of electricity and think of modulators or adaptogenic to the human being. So we've looked at where are these intriguing molecules, or sorry, what are these intriguing molecules? Now we're going to go to where are they made. And they're literally made within the cell in something called the mitochondria. So remembering the cell, we cannot see in the naked eye, and we can have thousands of mitochondria per one cell. And they say there's about 50 trillion human DNA cells in our body. So let's look at the functions of the mitochondria. So remembering we've got 50 trillion cells, and one of the functions that we've known for a long, long time is energy through cellular respiration. So this is where foods are broken down through the Krebs cycle, and we end up making something called adenosine triphosphate. And we now know it also makes electricity or redox signaling molecules. And these redox signaling molecules should be balanced. And when they're balanced, we basically then have great health. And what the mitochondria does, it makes redox signaling molecules out of NCl, hydrogen and oxygen. In our picture just there, we haven't got the N, but it should be N there, Na. So we've got sodium, chloride, hydrogen, and oxygen. And what the mitochondria does, it rearranges these molecules in all different types of redox signaling molecules. So once again, just to understand this at another level, I want you to think of the car that you may own. So the most important part of the car is the motor. And the motor then basically provides the energy and it provides the electricity via the battery. So I want you to think of the mitochondria does the same thing. It provides the energy via, or the power via ATP, and then it also provides the electricity via redox signaling molecules. And the mitochondria are the motors of every cell, and within each cell you can have 100 or over 7,000 mitochondria per one cell. So why? Why do we have such a variation? So say, for example, we want to grow our fingernail, and say our fingernail, let's just round it off to 1 million cells that makes up my fingernail. Now, I don't know, but let's just say it's 1 million. So how many mitochondria would we have in each cell? We don't need many mitochondria to grow our fingernails. So say it's the low number, 100. So how many mitochondria do we have in within our fingernail? 100 times 1 million. Now that's a big number. But now say I want to be able to see. So I want to be able to see. It's a more specialized cell we need, and to have the energy and the power, and we also need then the redox signaling molecules to be able to do this. We might then have to have up to 7,000 mitochondria per one cell. Now say, for example, we use the same mass. There's 1 million cells that make up the eye. So how many mitochondria do we need? We basically need 7,000 times what do we say? 7,000 times 1 million. That's a huge number, huge number. So this is how this all actually pans out with regards to the mitochondria. So imagine your car with 7,000 motors. Imagine your car with 7,000 motors. And the mitochondria turbines spin at 1,000 times per minute, recharging billions of tiny chemical batteries. Everything we do, every thought, every movement is powered by these batteries, charged by these cellular power stations, all modulated by redox signaling molecules. Let's dig a little bit deeper in how these redox signaling molecules are made. So we're mainly made up of water, and specifically we're mainly made up of salt water. And they say we're about average of 70%. The interesting thing about this statistic is the world is made up of salt water to about the same amount, 70%. Interesting statistic. So let's dig deeper again. As we age, the salt water in our body basically lessens. So when we're in mum's tum, for example, 90% of bub is salt water. Why? Because we need the energy, we need the redox signaling molecules, we need all this from the mitochondria to be able to develop bub. Then bub is born, and then it's about 80%. And the major thing I'd like to kind of get across here is that when you have more water in your body, you can make more redox signaling molecules, that's for sure, but you're more fluid, you're more agile, you're more flexible. So think of a young child that may fall down some steps. They'll basically just get up, brush themselves off and run away, and they're fine. Whereas when we get to, as you can see the far right-hand side there, when you get older, unfortunately, you can have 50 to 55% of, that's all you've got left in your salt water. And now what happens is you're more inflexible, you're more breakable, things basically hurt. So if at the older age, if you fall down the steps, or even if I fell down the steps these days, I'd basically be lying there going, okay, I can move my toes, I can move my fingers, because we haven't got the fluidity in our body to be able to have the resistance or the fluidity to basically not have any serious injuries from a fall like that. So let's dig deeper again. Remember, in sodium, chloride, hydrogen, and oxygen, the mitochondria makes energy through ATP. And really important here, these redox signaling molecules, this electricity, they should be balanced, okay? They should be balanced. So think of it like reds and blues, and they should be balanced. When the reds are balanced, the body then is able to protect the cells by activating antioxidants, and the major antioxidant in the body is glutathione. And Julie, I'm sure, will be talking more about glutathione as well later on. Really important, one of the most important antioxidants that we can have in our body. And then on the other side, the blues, the reactive oxygen species, they detect, repair, and replace damaged cells using the immune system. And remembering, this is all modulated or adapted through redox signaling molecules. So redox signaling molecules have native messenger molecules that detect disturbances in the cells, protect the cells, and then they repair and replace damaged cells. So we've basically now gone through where are they made, and they're made in the mitochondria. So now what we want to do now is go through how do they decline. So they mainly decline because of four main areas, and I'll get back to age shortly, but age is one of them. Two is what we eat and drink. And just over here, I've got a burger that unfortunately hasn't broken down. If you look there, it's got 2003. And some of these fast food places, it's interesting. Anyway, I'll just leave it there. So be careful of what we eat and drink. But what we're talking about here is as we eat and drink the wrong foods, we're actually declining our redox signaling molecules. Stress is a big one as well. Stress will really bring down redox signaling molecules. And the big one that we can't really get away from today is chemicals and stealth infections. Stealth infections like viruses and bacteria. And of course, right now, we're having a huge challenge with stealth infections, with infections that we know about, viruses. So that number 4 is a big one today. So we'll just go back and talk about age a little bit more. So redox signaling molecules decline from puberty at a rate of 10% per decade. So what does this mean? Say puberty occurs at 15, and for easy maths, say someone is 65. Of the 50 trillion cells in the body, that means that 25 trillion cells can't heal even no matter what you give them. Those 25 trillion cells can't receive the healing nutrients from food, vitamins, nutritional supplements, and herbs that are literally taking. So you can take all this stuff, you can take it all in, but at the age of 65, those 25 trillion cells are literally swimming around in a senile swamp. They just don't know what to do. They do not know what to do. They're bumping around going, hey, what are you doing? What do you think we should be doing? I don't know. I'm lost. I haven't got anyone telling me what to do. I need my redox signaling molecule mate to tell me what to do. And this is literally what happens in the body. So we've gone through those first 3, and now we're going to look at what we spoke about. We talked about age, eat and drink, stress, and chemicals and hidden infections or stealth infections. So now what we're going to look at now is why haven't I heard of them? So I'm sure that a lot of us have heard of antioxidants. So who's heard of an antioxidant? Most of us. However, they were first discovered, or research was first done in the 1920s. So 1920s, 1930s, 1940s, 1950s, 1960s, 1970s. Have we heard of redox signaling molecules? Sorry, wrong. Have we heard of antioxidants? No. Maybe in the 70s, but definitely not back here. Definitely not back there. We're still smoking heaps back in these decades. 80s, yeah, we're starting to hear about it. 90s, definitely. Now we definitely do. So it took 5 to 6 decades, maybe even 7 decades, for us to even hear about or understand anything about antioxidants. And this is one of the major reasons why we haven't heard of redox signaling molecules, because they were only first discovered in 1998 by these prestigious gentlemen. The Nobel Prize was given. And then from there, Nobel Prizes were given in cellular communication, 11, 12, 13, 14, and it was given in other areas as well. So from there, redox signaling molecules, less than 0.1% currently know about redox signaling molecules, less than 0.1%. Isn't this fantastic for all you people who are listening? Because it's kind of like, I want you all to think about this. I want you to think that we are medical doctors, okay? And we are way back before penicillin antibiotics. And people were dying from simple infections. And then antibiotics were discovered, penicillin was discovered. That was a game changer for the whole medical industry. Now, of course, we can talk about what's happening now, which is not so good with antibiotic-resistant bacteria. I'm not going to go there in this area. But the major thing with redox signaling molecules, that's the importance of understanding it now. We're so far ahead of the curve, it's unbelievable. And all you people who are listening, and you've had people that you've spoken to. You're on this webinar because there's a loved one or a friend said, come along and have a listen. You are so just in gratitude. Thank you for being here. So science is saying this technology is possibly 10 to 15 years ahead of its time. Science is saying this technology is possibly more important than the discovery of penicillin. And science is saying this technology is possibly more important than the discovery of the DNA helix. Also, science is saying last year there was actually a World Congress on redox molecules where around about 20 researchers and professors came together and basically shared their information about redox signaling molecules, and they're actually doing it again this year. Hopefully they're doing it then again this year. It might be postponed, but it's in France, and they'll be basically talking about it as well. So we've gone through what are these intriguing molecules, and we've gone through where are they made, why do they decline, and why haven't I heard of them? The main thing is because of time. It's only been a very short period of time that these things were first discovered. And the next thing I'd just like to go through now is the science. So please, please don't go to Dr. Google for your research. Now, the interesting thing about this, even though I am saying that now, and even though I knew this way back when I was first introduced to this technology by Julie, our next presenter, what did I do? I went to Google and I looked it up at Google. And back then, when I first looked it up, I thought I saw a bunch of websites that basically were negative about redox signaling molecules. After I did all my research, I actually went back and then had another look. And you know, there was only 2 websites that actually had negative reviews about redox signaling molecules. And if you type in naturopath, chiropractors, even medical doctors, you'll get thousands of hits in the negative about each one of those areas as well. So to have only 2 websites that are negative, that's pretty good. But please don't go to Google. Don't do that. It basically is a waste of time. It's not where you go to. Where we need to go to is Google Scholar, and you type in redox signaling molecules. You go to PubMed and you type in redox signaling molecules. And when you do that, you will then find that there are over 19,000 studies on redox signaling molecules that have been published in peer-reviewed scientific and medical journals. And as said, please go to PubMed. And there's been over 1,500 books on redox signaling molecules. And I've got one of them here that I look at quite often and read, and fantastic book, not exactly cheap, but a fantastic book. So when you look deeper into redox signaling molecules in terms of the oxidative stress, when there is oxidative stress, what happens now, the body starts to rust. And when we haven't got enough of them, so this is stressing, when we haven't got enough redox signaling molecules, we oxidize on the left-hand side, and we can then end up with hypertension, heart disease, Alzheimer's, macular degeneration, osteoarthritis, stroke, obesity, diabetes 2. And if it's more to do with the immune system, to do with inflammation or inflammatory stress, which is the reactive side, it's then we can end up with things like asthma, allergies, bowel issues, thyroid hormonal imbalances, autoimmune, cancer, and skin challenges. So this is when we haven't got enough. These are the things that can happen. Now, can someone have high blood pressure and maybe being overweight with an autoimmune disease and maybe some bowel challenges, etc., or skin problems? Of course you can. You can have both sides of the coin when we haven't got enough redox signaling molecules in our body. The major theme I'm just about to finish, the major theme here is we need to get more redox signaling molecules into our body, because when we do that, things can dramatically change. So what have we gone through? What are these intriguing molecules? Of course, they're called redox signaling molecules. Where are they made? They're made in the mitochondria. Why do they decline? They may decline because of age and what we eat and drink, stress, and then chemicals and stealth infections. Why haven't I heard of them? The answer there is time, and we've gone through the science. Please don't go to Dr. Google. So where we're going to go to now is what if we could supplement with these? And I would like to introduce now to Julie, and she will now go through her side of the presentation.